What's up, YouTube? This is Big Mike, and this is a response to the video that DStyleBoxing did on his channel entitled Buster Douglas's Chances versus Tyson. Selection of the video. If you guys haven't listened to the video, please listen to it. And if you're not subscribed to DStyleBoxing, please subscribe to DStyleBoxing. Excellent channel. You make a lot of excellent points in the video. I agree with everything you said, really. I agree that the odds of 42 to 1 were ridiculous. Even with I think Cassius Clay, when he fought, before he became Muhammad Ali, when he fought Sonny Liston back in 1964, I think the odds were 7 to 1 or 8 to 1 or something like that. And those are considered extremely long odds. 42 to 1 is just, that's just ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. I was telling someone the other day, a friend of mine on YouTube, I was telling him that sometimes when I look at those odds, man, I just wish I could get all the cash I can, go back in time and bet on Buster Douglas. You know what I mean? And be set for life. I'll be set for life. And, or at least for the next 10 or 20 years, I'll be set. 42 to 1 odds. 42 times whatever I have. It's a no-brainer. But those odds were ridiculous. But they were a testament to how Mike Tyson was perceived at that time. People forget that at that time, 1990, I say from 1988 to 1990, I say about a 2-year window, Mike Tyson was perceived as on his way to not only being the greatest heavyweight of all time, he was being seen as perhaps on his way to, I know this sounds ridiculous, but he was seen as, now it sounds ridiculous, but he was seen as a guy who could challenge Sugar Ray Robinson as being perceived as the greatest fighter of all time. And I'm not exaggerating. He was really seen as that dominant a fighter back then. Now, a lot of the problems with Tyson that started to occur, and this was going on unbeknownst to many even then, is that he, unlike, in my opinion at least, unlike a Joe Louis or a Rocky Marciano or which I think was Marciano's strongest trait, when I get to it, the point of what I'm trying to say, I think it was the strongest trait. And also a guy like Joe Louis, or I haven't said that, Muhammad Ali. I think that unlike Tyson, those individuals possessed an extremely strong mental makeup and an incredible will. These are individuals who they just had just something extra in them. Joe Louis kind of hid that, part of his personality, but he had it as well. Just incredible mentality where if they lost a fight, and Rocky never officially lost a fight, at least professionally, but if they lost a fight, their mentality was, the next time I'm coming out against this guy, I'm going to work twice as hard, and this guy's going to have to kill me to beat me the next time, or something like that. Tyson always has been plagued with, as a matter of fact, he was clinically re-diagnosed as having, because I think at one point he was diagnosed as being bipolar. And then he was diagnosed by an expert later on as having low self-esteem. And this has plagued him throughout his life. This was something that Customata saw in him when he first saw that this guy had all these physical gifts, but this is missing. This part of him is missing. He has very low self-esteem, and Customata always tried to build that part up in him that he to the point where he wanted this guy to believe in himself. And Customata was brilliant in that aspect, and Customata created magic with Mike Tyson. And he saw it in him. And Customata probably, arguably, is the greatest boxing mind, or one of the greatest 5 boxing minds we probably ever had. And he saw something in Mike Tyson. What does that tell you? But when Customata died, and when Jimmy Jacobs passed away, and when Bill Clayton was removed from the picture, and when he lost Kevin Rooney, Steve Lott, all these other guys, Mike Tyson began to be surrounded by people who were more interested in their personal well-being rather than building up Tyson as a fighter. And Tyson did not have the same work ethic, or to me, he didn't have the same motivation anymore. Tyson used to be motivated to be one of the great fighters of all times. And I think when he lost to Buster Douglas, I think it really hurt him. Also, you also alluded to something else in a video that you did, and I agree with you. I think that Robin Givens really hurt Mike Tyson emotionally. I don't think he was the same person after the Robin Givens thing, man. Even in interviews, have you ever listened to interviews that Mike Tyson did when he was 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, 22 years old? He listened to all the interviews he did afterward, 89, 90. He's gotten a lot better with this in the last few years. But there was a period of time, I would say from 89 on through the 2000s, Mike Tyson was a very bitter guy. You know what I mean? He was very bitter, man. I mean, I don't know what she did to this man, but God, even in the little Broadway show that he did, you could still hear the bitterness with him. She did something to him that I don't know. I mean, I can only speculate some of the things I've read, but it has to bother this guy to not only have gone through what he did with her, but then to, if you believe his side of the story, to be falsely accused of rape, to be in prison for something that you didn't do, and to be perceived as a monster, I'd be an asshole too. And I think that all of these things killed his spirit. I do. I think that they killed his spirit. That's what I clearly think, man. I think all of these life situations, because he had been having before that, he was having a very positive atmosphere. He was living around people who generally cared for him. He had a genuine home environment. But then he was surrounded by a more chaotic atmosphere, and he began to revert to things that were negative in his life. And he even, said that a lot of times he barely trained for a lot of his fights. This was afterward when he came back, from out of prison, and he just wasn't motivated anymore outside of paychecks. I think that was primarily his paycheck. Primarily his motivation, money. Mike Tyson could sell a hell of a fight. He was a great salesman, but he underperformed in the ring. And he was like you said, when he came out of prison, and fought. It's almost like he was just, and he went from being, the way I looked at him in the ring before, arguably one of the greatest fighters I've ever seen, to becoming a poor man's Ernie Shavers, pure headhunter, no technique whatsoever. I mean, this guy, I remember sometimes being like, wow, man, this guy swings and misses more than Jose Canseco. You know what I mean? He looks terrible sometimes. Tyson looked terrible in the ring. And then a lot of times, I think a lot of it was, he also had these gaps where he was suspended or he was inactive, or, he didn't have, like he did earlier in his career when he was fighting every 2 months or something like that, you know what I mean, or once a month, or, it's just a lot of different things went on with him. And also, I want to touch on what you talked about, where some people say, well, Evander Holyfield exposed him. Well, by the time Evander Holyfield fought Tyson was already 30 years old, and this was during a period of time, I think it was right after, it was 2 months after the Bruce Seldon fight, and they'll tell you how long ago it was. You'll never see a guy fight 2 months after a title fight, really nowadays, but it was 2 months after the title fight with Bruce Seldon. This is when Tyson was really was in a period of his career where he really was not taking, and I think he said this, he didn't take Evander Holyfield that seriously. And you have to remember something too. This was the time when Evander Holyfield looked to be on the downside of his career. He had lost to Riddick Bowe before. He looked kind of lackluster in that fight. There were some questions about his health, his heart, and all that. So I'm not trying to make excuses for Tyson, but he just had a history of not showing up sometimes and not being focused. And if I had to compare Mike Tyson to anybody as far as a entertainer, and this is going outside of sports, I know it's going to sound like a really weird comparison, but I would compare him to a guy like Jackie Gleason. And I know you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, Mike? Well, Jackie Gleason is considered the great one and this great comedian and this great talent, but if you look at his career, right, Jackie Gleason, he started, I think he got into entertainment business in the mid-30s. He used to work his ass off, all his different avenues, entertainment. He was a boxer. He was he worked in like a sort of a traveling circuit thing or whatever. Then he went into nightclub acts, and he's doing impressions. He used to do a lot of stuff, right? And he worked his ass off, and he became a big comedian, and he became very successful. He got into Cavalcade of Stars. Then he got his own program. Then he created this masterful sitcom, The Honeymooners. But it's almost like after The Honeymooners and after his show, he never regained the same quote-unquote form. And he pretty much was resting off of his reputation. He never really did anything after that, And I remember the guy who played Ed Norton, Art Carney, referred to Jack Gleason as the laziest guy he ever worked with as far as show business. He had all of this talent, but he could sometimes just not work at it. He just seemed like he didn't have a great work ethic. And I think that was a problem with Mike Tyson. Sometimes he just didn't have this great work ethic, But that's just my take on what you said, or what you were talking about in the video. And peace out, everybody.